I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Really special episode this week on the podcast. Lars May and her pug apparently are here as our guest today. Lars May is the founder of Half the Story, which is all about things that are really near and dear to my heart: social media, digital wellness, our mental well-being. The half the story of the things that we don't see, right? We only see the screen part that's right in front of us. So Lars, thank you for coming on the show. If your
Thank you
dog
so much.
barks or squeals or whatever, we will certainly,
Yeah, we
be good with
welcome
that.
emotional support animals and mascots on on all of our mental health shows. But thank you
Exactly.
so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and have this very timely conversation. And I know that you all work with a lot of tech clients, so hopefully this will be the opportunity to open up the conversation to talk more about the relationship between tech and well-being, which is something we like to call digital wellness.
Right. It's near and dear to my heart because I feel like I don't even have the attention span anymore, right? Like it's so bombarded, and you see these things on social media and it makes you question, how am I living my life? What do I need to do differently? And then I think about my own kids, right? And like as they start going through school now, how much are they going to get exposed to? What are they going to believe or get fooled by and get tricked into? So it's really a difficult time to be an adult, right? To be a parent.
And
And
a parent,
yeah,
let's just say, and how old are your kids?
they are preschool and younger, so they haven't started kindergarten yet, but they'll be there soon. And you start hearing about, I look out right now, it's kids walking home from middle school and they're all on their phones, right? Everything's on screens, and you wonder, is this going to end well for them? But tell me about your personal story, right? This is not just something that you're doing. This really had direct meaning for you. So walk us through your journey and what you experienced before you founded this and why you created it.
Absolutely. Well, Half the Story is a bright light and is certainly the focus of the middle of my universe now. It is my universe, my child, in addition to Poncho. And it's came from a really dark place. And so when I was in college, I was struggling with my mental health. And at the same time, I was also getting introduced to the digital world. I created social media accounts. I also have been a marketer for as long as I can remember, even when I didn't know what marketing was, and started falling into the trap of social media, but also the power of it. And I was actually able to build a business and start consulting and building social media. But on the flip side, I felt like social media was a magnifying glass for my emotions, and it made the dark ones darker and it made the good ones better in a lot of ways. Like the dopamine hit, this false sense of inclusion, or just all of those things that I think young people are facing right now. And so when I hit this rock bottom, I literally was dragged to the psych center on my college campus. And when I got in the room and did my whole diagnostic, and they gave me my antidepressants, which were definitely important to my journey, they asked me about drugs, sex, alcohol, and the people I spent my time with. And I wasn't completely I wasn't really one of those people that was into drugs. Of course, I had my fair share of drinking, as most college students do. But then I stepped back and realized they didn't ask me about the drug in my pocket, which was my cell phone. And
It's like
I
those are all
started,
forms from the 90s, right? It's like we need to add a very important thing on that menu. There's one big thing missing there.
absolutely. And so, I got out, did and my dog is barking for his ball. I got out of the center and wound up entering my mental health journey. And during that, I spent a lot of time alone and just looking at the way that young people's body language changed, looking at the way that people even looked like were taking photos of themselves and with others. And I also just started listening, and I felt that the number of conversations about social media, even just in the lunchroom, were starting to increase, whether it was about, filters or how pretty people looked. And those conversations started and never ended. And so I had this moment of just thinking and realizing, wow, I think we're missing a big piece of this puzzle. And it's really because I believe that social media and technology really is the cigarettes and drug of our generation. And I believe that in a few years that this is going to be one of the biggest challenges that we are all facing. And so I guess fast forward to now, that's where we are. And Half the Story started as a small idea and a college project, and now we're really the leaders at the intersection of technology and emotional health for youth.
How did you grow this from zero, right? From your own, just doing it by yourself. It's in college. You're gradually getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What were some of those milestones along the way? My guess is you couldn't have foreseen at the time that it would get to be this big and impactful when at the time that you started it.
No, I really didn't. I mean, I think I've always been a visionary and I've had big ideas. And as I told you, I loved advertising and marketing. And I think at a young age, I realized the power of storytelling and social storytelling, and that life and the best marketing and the best companies and the best things in the world that touch us aren't about changing our minds, but really about touching our hearts. And so I started Half the Story by just printing Half the Story stickers out and sharing my own story on social media, which really started a grassroots movement where young people all around the world started to share their stories. And after that, it started as just a little grassroots movement. I was bootstrapping it. We got like a $250 grant from campus. I was telling my story. I was doing a lot of outreach and just hearing other young people. And then when I graduated college, I moved to New York and I was an entrepreneur and was like starting to work on these other direct to consumer brands, because they were venture backed businesses, and I would join alongside the founders basically as first employees and take the companies from zero to Series A, or multiple tens of millions of dollars. And so along that journey, I was basically working two full-time jobs because I didn't know what Half the Story was going to become. I just thought it was this project. And then I started booking myself for speaking engagements on college campuses because I believed that that would be the best way to fund it. And then I finally had this moment in 2018 where we became a nonprofit. And shortly after, the doors just started to open. I remember I got my IRS letter and like a $3,000 small business grant on the same day. A couple months later, we were on Good Morning America. And there were just little signs in the universe that told me that this was the path to keep following, regardless of how hard it was and how hard it still is. I'm coming off like being on a red eye and then sleeping on my friend's couch the other night. So it's definitely, the obstacles don't end in entrepreneurship. I think the bigger you become, the bigger the struggles are in many ways. And so it's just about appreciating all moments of the journey, and especially the smaller, simple ones from the early days.
Your website mentions all screen time is not created equal.
Yes.
What's good? What's bad? Is it
So
just social media? Like walk me through how you think about this.
absolutely. So the way we like to think about technology consumption is active versus passive. So active consumption is when you have an intention or a purpose and a reason to be there. So you know exactly why you're picking up your phone to get on it. You know exactly why you're getting on your computer to do the same. I would say active and positive ways to use technology. Social media can be positive if you're there to reconnect with people. Active ways of using technology can also be to support mindfulness, like mindfulness apps, or even using things like Nike Run Club to help you get out in the world and take care of your fitness. Passive consumption is just as simple as when you pick up your phone without a specific intention or reason and you're using it to pass time. Like anything else, like if you were to pull out a large bag of family Cheetos because you were feeling sad or lonely, you would consume those Cheetos without thought while watching probably some junky TV show and not feel so great after it. And the same thing goes for tech. When you get on there without an intention, a lot of times you get pulled into the rabbit hole and you get spit out, and it really has a negative impact on your emotional well-being and your self-esteem, and not to mention you've probably just wasted a bunch of time. A lot of people don't know this, but the average American teen is spending between 7.5 and 8 hours behind their screen a day, and over a lifetime that's 30 years.
And it's a full-time job, right? 8 hours a day is a full-time job it's amazingly high. So then the focus is it on screen time? Is it on social media? Is it phone versus desktop? Like how do you see or how do you rank the dangers either by platform, by medium, by where you spend the time?
Well, everyone's relationship with technology is unique to them. It's like I always say our relationship to technology is very much so like our relationship to food, and that it's unique for everyone. It's really contingent upon our upbringing, our socioeconomic backgrounds, all those different things play a role in the way that technology impacts us. The way that we look at digital well-being at Half the Story is really actually focused first on emotional health, then focusing on digital habits, because what the opportunity cost of technology is that you're not actually able to sit with your emotions or really even identify with your emotions. And emotional agility has gone down a lot, especially for the younger generation. So we like to start by using education as a means to help introduce them to concepts like emotional agility, identifying with their emotions, even just connecting with themselves to understand why they are using technology in the way they are. And then from there, we focus on digital habits. And I think to answer your question about it, what's worse, look, I think we all know that violence, video games with violence, those sorts of things are really taxing. We know that social media algorithms have been built to hook kids, and they are predatory in a lot of ways. I like to say that tools like Pinterest are much more creative platforms and oftentimes are for inspiration. So I tend to think that's really positive. I personally think that TikTok is actually a really dangerous place. One, because it's really prioritizing the shock factor when it comes to what it rewards in the algorithm, which is leading to a lot of issues like kids posting things that they wouldn't want to be posting in 10 years down the road, even more so than I think Instagram was. And then on top of that, just the lack of monitoring as it relates to these challenges and all of the all the things that young kids are facing, from the tide challenges and all these things that they think they need to do to fit in. And so I just think that that is really terrifying. I think it's also terrifying that in America, kids on TikTok see something completely different, and this is probably the same on all social platforms, as kids do in China, which is actually where TikTok is owned. So if you look at a kid's TikTok platform in China, they're actually receiving different types of content, and they have different types of algorithms. I've even heard that they actually like black out the platform for younger kids, like at certain times of the week. I have to go to China to investigate that, but look, like it is no joke, and it is really, really scary to think about the ways that kids are using technology and how it's actually impacting the way that their brains are developing. And I think that that's like one of the biggest things that we have to continue researching and learning about in order to make sure that we can evolve with it rather than let technology take control of us.
One of the big initiatives you have is the Global Day of Unplugging. That was August 6th, I think, if I remember right. How do you grow that cause? Because part of it is you grow it digitally, right? Like so much of how you're trying to reach people is through digital, but the message you're telling them is the exact opposite. Like, hey, I know you've reached me. I know I've got this message out to you digitally, but I want you to unplug on this day. How do you grow that? How do you continue to make that a bigger and bigger thing, like
Yeah.
some of the other days around the calendar?
Yeah, I think, our POV with the Global Day of Unplugging is that this is like a day of the year to really intentionally analyze the role that technology plays in your life, and have a conversation about that. And it's not, I don't believe that detoxes really work for nutrition and necessarily technology. I look at it as more of like a screen free celebration and an opportunity for you to connect with your loved ones, new friends, creativity, the things that you love, and really just have the hard conversations with yourself and others. It's almost like this Sabbath, to not use technology. How we've grown is interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think in the digital world, the way that so many people receive information is through the internet, and we can't ignore that. But we've also seen a departure from traditional digital media and more of a return to PR and in real life activations and traditional things like out of home and mailers. And for us at Half the Story, we have done some out of home thanks to generous partners and friends like Viacom. We had a billboard in Times Square, and we actually have used the Global Day of Unplugging as a way to digitally activate people and communities to get out in the real world on that day across the globe. And so for us, that's what our focus is, and that's how we aim to continue to grow.
The pandemic obviously had a huge impact, especially people in school, right? It's all screens. You can't talk to anybody in real life. You can only talk to them on screens and social. Are you seeing now, either through your research or anecdotally, the impacts of that now, either people still in school or maybe people just graduating, even people in the workplace, right? They didn't get to see anyone in the workplace for a long time. Anything in particular that's affected you at Half the Story?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I think one is that, the digital academic system doesn't turn off. So a lot of kids now are experiencing the same anxiety that they did with social media in school because of so much that has gone digitally, like immediately getting test results, getting this instant feedback loop. So it's really hard for them to escape that. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and there's a little bit of research on this, is that with everything in textbooks and things going digital, one, time span, attention spans are going down, and kids are starting to read books at school like they would social media. So they're actually not taking in all of that information. And then lastly, there's something that we call the toggle tax, which is when you switch in between tasks. And I think kids, because they're on their phones and doing things at school, doing all these things at once, multitasking has been introduced to them as a normal, when in reality, it's actually physically impossible for like 99% of the world to actually multitask. And so there was an interesting article about the toggle task in the Harvard Business Review about a week ago, and just how, every time when you move between things, you're losing energy and it actually impacts your emotional well-being. And so I think all of those factors are really playing into the state of what kids are feeling, and most certainly is impacting the way that they access information, but also the way that they are able to or relate or not with students in the real world, because they're more comfortable just being online, even
So
with
all
their
of these
teachers.
issues, who is the best position to fix this? Is it tech companies themselves? Is it parents, kids? Is it, the government putting in regulations? Where do you see is the best place to resolve this?
I mean, I think that it's a really complex question. And for us, we think about it as a delta of change. And there's kind of three key players in this. So one is the top, like the tech companies. There are standards that you have to have in place for security and safety, no questions asked. We wouldn't let kids drive around a car that doesn't have, the right safety systems in place. We need to use the government to hold tech companies accountable to ensure that at least the baseline is done. Is that going to fix all the problems? No. Why? Because there's cultural, there's familial, there's all these different factors that impact a child's experience. I think the second key players in the space are actually advertising agencies and content creators, who are the ones responsible for putting out the content in the world. And we're starting to see, I think, much more inclusivity and shifts in the type of content and language that people are using. But we still have a long way to go in terms of how we can improve. And then the last piece is really leaning on the ecosystem and the school system. And I think at Half the Story, we really believe in empowering youth to lead this movement and also teach other youth and embed that into educational ecosystems, districts, and also work with other nonprofits, because we believe that knowledge is power. And in a lot of ways, we just expect kids to know how to use these devices without ever giving them the tools emotionally or socially to transition and use these. So that's really where Half the Story's focus is at, I would say the highest level with policy, and then the lowest level with knowledge and education.
When you're speaking to different stakeholders, what's the biggest source of pushback that you get for why they don't want to change?
Well, we don't get any pushback from schools. It's everyone's kind of chomping at the bit for what we do. But when it comes to tech companies, and we spend a lot of time in Sacramento lobbying this spring, and we work a lot in policy, it comes down to money at the end of the day. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, they care about the mental health of our kids, kind of, sort of, but what they care more about is that their shareholders are getting the returns. And that's just how companies work and how capitalism works. So there's very few incentives for tech companies and social media companies to actually have these systems in place, other than maybe like good PR, which clearly some of them don't care about at all, um, given, just the state of the union and where things are at. And so I think, we can't rely on tech companies to change their policies when we are their product and our kids are their product, because we're living in the attention economy.
So on your phone right now, what apps do you have? What apps do you refuse to use? How do you live this knowing everything that you know?
I think, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm so busy trying to just like run this movement that I don't even have time to like sit on my phone and use it. I think for me, when I create content, it's with the intention to create for knowledge sharing. I'm never like in like taking Instagram photos and like editing them to see if I look good. Like it's like, okay, great, I'm doing this thing, or I'm this is breaking news and I want to cover this and share this with my community. So I think the way that I've really tried to live this is by having an intention for every time that I use technology, whether it be for work or whether it be to educate and create. And I think that's been the biggest shift. In terms of, apps and things on my phone, I don't have Discord on my phone. I don't, which a lot of the Web3 community is using. I actually don't have Slack on my phone, even though that's how my team communicates, because I think it's so easy to just like mindlessly check it, like every place and everything you're doing. And when I'm on vacation, I try to remove email from my phone because I think otherwise it's really hard to create boundaries.
That's good. I mean, it really is. It's a challenge. What's one thing that anybody can do, right? Whether you're just a normal person, you're listening to this, what's one thing somebody can do today to at least make their life better or make, a loved one's life better about all this?
This is the simplest thing you can do, but I would say getting an alarm clock. Getting an alarm clock instead of relying on your phone to wake you up so that you can count on waking up and going to bed screen free.
I like it. I like it. We already do that. We leave our phones downstairs and we go upstairs and the phones don't make it up there. We have my mom's alarm clock from the 1990s that still works. So I know what you're saying, is that's been key, is not having the phone as the very first and the very last thing that you do. Lars, this has been super fascinating. I could go and talk to you about all this for like 2 hours, but I know our listeners have other things to do. So really, thank you so much for the time. We covered a lot of things here. I'm glad that you exist. I'm glad that you created Half the Story. I think this is so important. I think there's a lot that we can all do. I think certainly the first step for people who don't know is just being aware, right? Knowing Absolutely. That these are issues. The person listening right now, they may not struggle with it, but maybe it's their friend, their coworker, their family member who is struggling with it. And just knowing that it's out there and that there's resources to try to make a difference. And that if the more we are aware of all this, the more we can get back on track and get back to a better society of people that are not staring at screens all day.
Well, I really appreciate the time and thank you for sharing your platform with us. It means the world.
Thanks, Lars. Appreciate it so much.
All right. Chat soon.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.